we have been discussing about the early Greek philosophers, and we have been discussing about the founder of atomism, Leucippus, though his disciple Democritus had expanded the atomistic philosophy in a more pronounced manner. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Now, when we talk about Leucippus, we must understand that most of the sources of his writings are scattered references, fragments, and summaries of his ideas as picked up from the commentaries of various later philosophers. So, to begin with, let us see some of the key mentions of Leucippus in the works of few philosophers as follows. We see the mention of Leucippus or atomism in Aristotle's work, for instance, be it Metaphysics or Physics, especially Book 4, Metaphysics Book 1 and 4, or on Generation and Corruption. The significance is that Aristotle gives us the most substantial account of atomism and attributes it to Leucippus and Democritus. He discusses the concept of void, motion, and atomistic theory. He mentions their view that all changes are due to the arrangement and motion of atoms. Example, in Metaphysics, Aristotle notes Leucippus and his associate Democritus hold that the full and the empty are the elements, calling the one being and the other non-being. We also see mention of the atomistic philosophy in Theosophrastus in his key work on the opinions of the natural philosophers, which is mostly preserved in later sources, and as Aristotle's student Theophrastus preserves many detailed views of pre-Socratic thinkers. He discusses Leucippus's concept of atoms, motion, and the role of necessity in natural events. Much of Theophrastus's writing survives only through later doxographers like Simplicius and Diogenes Laertius. Now, Diogenes Laertius again is yet another important commentator whose key work, Lives and Opinions of Eminent Philosophers, especially Book 9, talks largely about atomism. Here, Diogenes Laertius in this work provides a brief biography of Leucippus and Democritus and lists the alleged writing about the great world system and discusses atomism. He quotes a famous fragment attributed to Leucippus, which is, "Nothing occurs at random, but everything happens for a reason and by necessity." Again, Simplicius, 6th century CE, we see the commentaries on Aristotle's Physics, which is Simplicius preserves important quotations from earlier authors like Theosophrastus and Leucippus himself. He offers interpretations and summaries of pre-Socratic doctrines on motion, beings, and void. We also have Atheist, who possibly in the 1st to 2nd century CE had some very significant key work where he compiled from earlier sources of Theosophrastus, and the significance of it is that it preserves doxographical accounts of Leucippus's views on cosmology, atoms, and physics. It offers a comparative views with other pre-Socratic thinkers. The later Roman sources like Luceritus, and who has been a Roman Epicurean poet who expands on Democritus atomism. Though focused on Epicurus, Luceritus indirectly preserves the spirit and structure of Leucippus's and Democritus's ideas. We also have Plutarch, Sextus Empiricus, Galen, who occasionally mention atomist views in discussions of ethics, natural science, and epistemology. The surviving fragments, we see Leucippus has been assigned DK 67, which is Diels-Kranz numbers, in the standard Diels-Kranz edition of pre-Socratic fragments. Only one direct fragment is typically attributed to Leucippus with confidence, and that is DK 67b2, and the quotation has been that nothing happens at random, but everything occurs for a reason and by necessity. Now, let us now see the most relevant comparisons that can be made with Leucippus Democritus's atomism and our Oriental traditions of Indian Vaisheshika school of Kannada. Now, for the Greek atomism of Leucippus and Democritus, to recap again, matter for them is made up of indivisible atoms that differ in shape, arrangement, and position. Void exists to allow motion. The universe operates by necessity. No need for gods or design. All change, motion, and recombination of atoms, and emphasizes rational causality and natural law. Now, the Indian rationalist traditions, the Vaisheshika atomism of Kannada, we see that he proposes that everything is composed of eternal atoms, anu, or four types: earth, water, fire, air. Space, time, soul, mind are separate eternal realities. Atoms for the Vaisheshika are again indivisible, eternal, and combine to form complex objects. Emphasizes a natural law and logical categories. Padarth, God or Ishvara, is not necessary for the functioning of atoms, but is sometimes added in later developments. Now, in the Buddhist Abhidhamma, we see it rejects the enduring substances. Everything is momentary, kshanika. World made of dharmas, basic mental and material events. No eternal self or soul. Focus on causal patterns, pratitya samutpada, or dependent origination, not divine causes. The Jain philosophy, the dualistic world consists of jiva, consciousness, and padgala, matter. Matter exists in atom-like units, pramanu. Universe is eternal, self-regulating, governed by karma. No need for creator deity. Natural laws operate without divine intervention. Now, if we look at the PPT being displayed here between the Greek atomism versus Indian rationalist thinkers, we see that the feature of core thinker for Leucippus and Democritus has been from the West. Indian, we have Kannada, the founder of Vaisheshika. The early Buddhist thought, we have the Abhidharma thinkers, and the Jain philosophy, Mahavira, Jainism's founder. The basic elements have been atoms, which is atomos plus void. The Indian Vaisheshika is atoms, anu, plus space, akasha. For the early Buddhist thought, we have dharmas, or the momentary elements, and for the Jain philosophy, it is jiva plus padgala, or the soul, and matter. Now, for the feature of the cause of change, the Greek atomism again, motion of atoms in the void. For Vaisheshika, in the Indian strand, it is inherent motion or karma and combinations of atoms. And the early Buddhist thought, it is the momentary arising and ceasing. Jain philosophy, it is the interaction of soul and matter. The role of deity, the Greek atomism is about none. Indian Vaisheshika, not required for cosmology. Early Buddhist, again non-theistic. Jain philosophy, gods exist but are not creators. View of matter, for the Greeks it is eternal, indivisible atoms. For the Indian, it is eternal and indivisible atoms of types and substances. For the early Buddhist thought, it's the skandha and dharmas are impermanent. For Jain philosophy, it is the matter is eternal. And about void and space, Greek atomism, it is void or relation to non-being. And Indian Vaisheshika again, akasha or space is one of the 9 substances. Early Buddhist thought, space is rational, not an entity. Jain philosophy, space is infinite and real. Further about teleology, again the Greek atomism says that none, it's no final cause. Vaisheshika talks again that it's none, it's based on inherent properties. Early Buddhist thought again says it is no, it's teleology, dependent origination. The Jain philosophy, it says it's partial teleology via karmic law. The goal again of Greek atomism is that it understands reality via reason. For the Vaisheshika again, it's liberation through knowledge. For the early Buddhist thought, it is liberation via insight into impermanence. The Jain philosophy again, liberation of soul from karmic matter. The method, if we are to talk about it, the Greek atomism talks about rational speculation logic. Indian Vaisheshika, the Kannada model, talks about logic plus empirical observation. The early Buddhist thought talks about mindful observation and analysis. Jain philosophy talks about logical pluralism plus realism. Now, the common themes across traditions about naturalism, they would all agree that world explained without appeal to gods or divine plans. Atomism, existence of basic eternal units of matter, causality. Events happen due to necessity, not random chance. About the theme of rational method, the common insight has been that it is emphasis on observation, inference and reasoning. Liberation or goal, it is the ultimate knowledge of freedom through understanding reality. Both Greek and Indian atomism, they emphasize reason over myth. They develop ontologies based on minimal logical units. They provide early frameworks for philosophy of science. The Indian schools go further in psychological and ethical integration, linking cosmology with spiritual liberation. The Greek atomism tends to remain physicalist and epistemological, laying groundwork for scientific materialism. So Leucippus's rational materialism shares a striking philosophical kinship with early Indian rational traditions like Vaisheshika, Buddhists Abhidharma and Jaina metaphysics. Though arising independently, these systems reflect a global, pre-modern awakening of rational inquiry, emphasizing causality without gods, atoms or irreducible elements, law-like structure of the universe, and human capacity for reason and liberation through knowledge. Now that we are through with Leucippus, we will be discussing about Democritus in this lecture further to have a better understanding of the atomistic philosophy. Now, who is Democritus? Democritus is someone about 460 BCE to 370 BCE, was a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher from Abdera in Thrace, often known as the laughing philosopher because of his emphasis on cheerfulness and his mockery of human follies. Democritus was famously known as the laughing philosopher. In Greek, it is Gallon ho philosophos. And the reasons are, firstly, his attitude towards life. Democritus was known for his cheerful disposition and mockery of human follies, vanities, and pretensions. He believed that laughter was a wise response to the irrationality, greed, fear, and seriousness with which people approached life. Instead of mourning human ignorance, he laughed at it, seeing it as part of a grand mechanistic universe. The philosophical reasoning. He considered tranquility or euthymia as the highest goal of life, a state of inner peace and contentment. To reach to these, one must rise above the sufferings caused by desire, fear, and delusions. Laughter, in this sense, reflects detachment, wisdom, and cosmic perspective. Now, there is an interesting contrast of Democritus with Heraclitus. Heraclitus is yet one of the earlier Greek philosophers whose arche has been largely about fire, and the other important part has been about the logos becoming. While Heraclitus was called the weeping philosopher for lamenting the folly and misery of humankind, Democritus responded with laughter, not because he didn't care, but because he had a broader vision of the cosmos, one in which human struggles are small and not worth getting agitated over. Now, there are various sources supporting this title, and some of them are Cicero, Seneca and Aulus Gellius, who mentions this nickname in their works. Even Diogenes Laertius, in Lives and Opinions of Eminent Philosophers, documents many anecdotes about Democritus's cheerful disposition and use of laughter to convey philosophical detachment. Renaissance and Enlightenment thinkers like Montaigne and Voltaire admired Democritus for his optimistic rationalism and scientific spirit. So we see that the laughter of Democritus is not mockery but a philosophical laughter born of understanding the smallness of human concerns in the face of the infinite, ever-moving world of atoms and void. It symbolized a new attitude of reason, joy, and lightness in the emerging naturalistic worldview. Now, Democritus is best known for being the co-founder of atomism along with his teacher Leucippus. His work profoundly influenced later scientific and philosophical thought, particularly through Epicurus and Luceritus, and eventually through modern atomic theory. Further, in a more detailed manner now, who was Democritus? Democritus is a polymath. He studied mathematics, astronomy, ethics, natural sciences, and epistemology. He is known for materialistic metaphysics and denied divine intervention and promoted naturalistic explanations. His ethics focused on achieving eudaimonia, happiness, through inner tranquility and moderation. He wrote over 70 works. The titles are preserved, but no complete works survive, unfortunately. His thoughts are known only through fragments quoted by later authors like Aristotle, Theophrastus, Diogenes Laertius, and Simplicius. So, if we come to the question then, what was the arche according to Democritus? We could say that in Greek philosophy, arche refers to the first principle or originating substance of everything. For Democritus, the arche was atoms and void. Atoms is indivisible, eternal, unchangeable, and invisible units of matter. It differs not in quality but in shape, position, and arrangement. Void for them is the empty space that allows atoms to move and rearrange, and without void, motion would be impossible. This was a radical departure from earlier monists like Thales or Anaximenes or Heraclitus, because Democritus postulated pluralism of unchangeable elements. Now, if we look into the PPT as being displayed here about the sources for Democritus's philosophy, we see that since none of Democritus's original works survived, in fact, knowledge of his philosophy comes from later doxographers and philosophers, including Aristotle. The contribution has been critical but informative accounts of atomism and Democritian causality. Theophrastus, who had been a student of Aristotle, and the contribution has been about the summaries of pre-Socratic doctrines. Diogenes Laertius, whose contribution has been the biographical details and fragments. Sextus Empiricus, whose contribution again has been the references to atomist theories in epistemological arguments. We also see Simplicius, who has been a commentator on Aristotle, and his contribution has been preserved, long quotations and ideas, and Luceritus, whose contribution is seen as a Roman poet philosopher who adopted and adapted atomism via Epicurus. So, the philosophical insights of Democritus' philosophy has been metaphysics and cosmology, where he had stated that everything consists of atoms and void. The universe is mechanistic and deterministic. There is no teleology, purpose-based causes. All changes are due to the rearrangement of atoms, not intrinsic changes in their nature. So, if we are to unpack this in detail, we will see that metaphysics about what exists, what is the nature of being and reality. Ontology was about what are the most fundamental constituents of reality. Cosmology is about how did the universe come to be, what is the structure. So about ontology, what exists at the foundation of Democritus's and Leucippus's philosophy lies the claim that reality consists of only two things: atoms, being, and void, non-being or empty space. So atoms are those uncuttable or eternal, indivisible and indestructible particles that differ in shape, size, position and arrangement, and not perceptible by the senses but postulated by reason. The qualities like color, taste and temperature arise from combination of atoms but are not intrinsic to the atoms themselves. And about void, it is stated that it is the empty space that allows motion. It is not a nothingness in the absolute sense, but a necessary ontological reality. It is denied by Parmenides, who claimed that what is not cannot exist, but Leucippus, Democritus boldly affirmed its existence to explain motion and multiplicity. Thus, ontology is a dualistic materialism. Atoms plus void is equivalent to everything. And about metaphysics, what is reality like? They would say it is materialism. Only matter or atoms and space, void, are real. No immaterial souls, no supernatural entities, no ideal forms. Even the soul and mind are composed of fine, round atoms that move rapidly. About the mechanism, everything happens through the mechanical motion and interaction of atoms. Atoms collide, interact, whirl, or rebound in causal physical ways like billiard balls. There is no divine purpose, no final causes, and no teleology in nature. This is a direct rejection of Plato and Aristotle, who both proposed purpose-based explanations of nature. Now about determinism, the universe operates by strict necessity, and given the motion and arrangements of atoms, all outcomes are inevitable. There is no room for chance, free will or divine intervention. About cosmology again, structure of the universe is infinite in size and eternal in time. There is no center, no boundary, no highest or lowest point. Worlds form and perish naturally as atoms cluster in the void. About the cosmic plurality, it is an infinite number of worlds may exist, some like ours, some unlike. This anticipates modern multiverses theory. So how are worlds formed? Atoms whirl and entangle in the void, forming clusters. These clusters give rise to compound bodies, stars, planets and life. Everything is transient. There is no beginning or end to the universe. Now about the ontological status of qualities, primary versus secondary qualities, they would say that primary qualities are real, the shape, size, motion, arrangement of atoms, and the secondary qualities are subjective, the color, taste, sound, small. In fact, there is a quotation of Democritus reported by Sextus Empiricus, which I am quoting here, quote, "By convention sweet, by convention bitter, by convention hot, by convention cold, by convention color, in reality only atoms and the void," unquote. Now this proto-empiricist view laid the groundwork for later scientific realism. Again, if we are to talk about the key metaphysical consequences of the concept, here we would see, as in the PPT being shown, about change, the explanation would be that it is not the transformation of substance but rearrangement of eternal atoms. Again, about creation and destruction, they would say that it is nothing truly comes into being or is annihilated, only combinations change. About soul and mind, they would say that it is composed of fast moving atoms and dies with the body. About God, the explanation is that if they exist, they are composed of atoms too, and they are not supernatural. And about freedom, they would say that human behavior is necessitated by atom arrangements, not the free will. Thus, we see that Democritus's atomism presents a radically naturalistic metaphysics. There is no supernatural causes, no divine purposes, no teleological ends, just eternal matter in motion, forming the universe by mechanical necessity. This view helped birth modern science by introducing explanations based on causality, not mythology, reductionist thinking from wholes to parts, early concepts of determinism, materialism, and emergent properties. So, if we also talk about the epistemology, we see that there has been a distinction between two types of epistemology, which is legitimate or genuine, gained through reasoning, and false or obscured, which is gained through senses. In reality, we know nothing, for the truth is in the depths, is yet another important quote, which is picked up from the Fragments of Decay. Now, despite being a rationalist, Democritus still recognized the role of sense perception as a starting point for knowledge. Now, there are more focus about epistemology. There are more detailed views about the two kinds of knowledge. There is more detailed versions about the knowledge that Democritus had picked up, and in our next class we will be talking about the Democritus's theory of knowledge, the epistemological part in a more detailed manner. Thank you for being with us.